Buongiorno a tutti. Come Presidente del Gruppo Giovani di Assagenti, prima di iniziare i lavori vorrei fare un ringraziamento a tutti voi presenti, alle autorità del sistema portuale per averci ospitato nella magnifica sede di Palazzo San Giorgio e per chi non ci conosce dire due parole di presentazione sul nostro gruppo. Siamo una cinquantina di persone, di giovani tra i 20 e i 40 anni, tutti appartenenti alle aziende associate. E proprio perché siamo un gruppo di giovani che guardano a Genova, allo shipping e al mondo con grande interesse e prospettiva internazionale, abbiamo l'obiettivo di organizzare attività che contribuiscano a divulgare la cultura dello shipping e a motivare nuove leve allo spirito associativo. Le nostre sono iniziative formative e culturali, seminari, convegni ed eventi, come lo Shipbroker Dinner, un evento internazionale a cadenza biennale che porta a Genova circa 3.000 professionisti del nostro settore provenienti da tutto il mondo. Da questa visione di divulgazione della cultura dello shipping e delle sue grandi implicazioni internazionali è nata la volontà di organizzare questo seminario, il cui argomento rappresenta davvero una svolta epocale per il nostro settore. Per questo ringrazio particolarmente i giovani del nostro gruppo che lo hanno pensato e proposto. Auguro a tutti una buona mattinata e passo a presentare il seminario e i suoi protagonisti, passando ovviamente alla lingua inglese. Good morning to everybody. According with Alex Tapscott, author of the bestseller Blockchain Revolution, the blockchain has the potential to revolutionize global finance, public administration, health and education. So we wondered, could the blockchain, together with cryptocurrencies, also revolutionize the world of shipping? It could seem to be the greatest innovation of the sector after the containerization of 60, that ushered in the era of globalization. Many industry players are already studying, developing, and using blockchain-based platforms that are able to simplify, improve, and make the handling of goods safer throughout the complex chain of international distribution. But the blockchain challenge is even bigger than the evolution itself. Shipping companies, manufacturers, banks, insurance companies, brokers, and port authorities are working to develop a protocol that can integrate all the new systems into a single platform. One thing is certain. We have entered in the second era of Internet, and this is only the beginning. Let's talk about this with our prestigious speakers. Ferdinanda Metrano, Digital Gold Institute Executive Director, teacher of Bitcoin and Blockchain Technologies at Politecnico di Milano and Milano Bicocca University, top expert in national and international field. Richard Morton, General Secretary of International Port Community System Association, platform for administrative and operational management of process in port environment. Igor Yakominov, Chief Operating Officer at CargoX, specialized platform of solution of smart bill of lading, smart insurance. Vasily Kotilevsky, founder and CEO of OpenSea, specialized platform in shipping for ship owners and charterers. Thanks for your participation, and now let's leave the floor to our first speaker, Ferdinanda Metrano, to introduce the blockchain topic. Carolina. Tra i saluti c'era quello istituzionale del dottor Maresca, che viene in rappresentanza del nostro sindaco Marco Bucci del Comune di Genova.
Grazie dell'invito, vi porto i saluti del sindaco Marco Bucci che oggi non poteva essere qui, però la blockchain, soprattutto nello shipping in ambito portuale, è un argomento molto sentito dall'amministrazione comunale e siamo contenti che Assagenti e anche altre associazioni di categoria abbiano, a cuore questa importante catena, perché crediamo che anche noi come amministrazione comunale, come politica, abbiamo il dovere di portare anche non soltanto le nuove generazioni verso i mestieri che ci sono adesso, ma anche le nuove generazioni verso i nuovi mestieri del mare che riguardano sempre di più l'automazione dei processi portuali e dello shipping. La blockchain ormai è un dato di fatto che sempre nel tempo crescerà e siamo contenti veramente che anche nel nostro porto, forse il nostro porto e il nostro shipping è una delle categorie portuali e uno dei porti più preparati in questo ambito. Io sono contento anche che abbiamo illustri persone che vengono da altri paesi come Giacomin che è ex ministro sloveno, quindi io sono veramente contento e sicuramente porterò al sindaco una grossa parte del vostro convegno, perché credo che anche come adesso abbiamo un progetto come Comune di Genova per fare una specie di port 4.0 con la città. L'obiettivo finale è arrivare a essere il primo porto certificato in Europa, che credo che sia uno degli obiettivi più importanti che la comunità portuale e anche il Comune di Genova, che dipende dalla comunità portuale, grazie ai 58.000 posti di lavoro, è un obiettivo a cui dobbiamo arrivare. Quindi vi ringrazio, lascio la parola a persone più preparate di me in questo campo e grazie a tutti voi.
Inglese, giusto? Va bene? Sì. Okay, so good morning everybody. It's a pleasure to be here in such a nice location. Thank you for having invited me. A quick introduction of Bitcoin and blockchain technology with a few notes for the shipping industry. Blockchain and Bitcoin are in a way hard to understand because they are the crossroads of cryptography and computer networking and distributed systems, game theory and monetary theory. So this is the reason why it is hard, because it covers different areas that it's quite infrequently under the management of a single person, okay? And I do not like the fact that we talk often about blockchain technology. This is not really a technology, it's a cultural paradigm shift instead, okay? So to figure out a few of these points this morning, we will have to go through a few steps, but it's almost inevitable that we should start from Bitcoin because that is where everything started, and the proper understanding of the blockchain technology using Bitcoin will help us assess the usage in other areas. What is Bitcoin? Well, you probably know that it is a digital currency, decentralized digital currency, because the key part is not about being digital. Euro and dollars are also digital, but about being decentralized, so not backed by any government or organization. It doesn't need any trusted third party, and it does allow instead instantaneous peer-to-peer transaction based on cryptographic security and synergic economic incentive. And this will be a major point of this quick talk this morning, clarifying what I mean by synergic economic incentives. And it could represent, or it does represent, efficient low-cost banking for everybody, everywhere. We have been all experiencing, at least the not young in this room, the digitization process. I mean, mail has become electronic, encyclopedia became Wikipedia, music and films have become liquid, and there is the expectation for a full banking and financial system to enter into our smartphone. And the Bitcoin blockchain is in pole position. Why that? Well, if you think about the fact that if we exchange a business card, so we exchange a mobile phone number or an email, immediately we are able to transfer a relevant amount of data, I will almost say illimited amount of data, with zero marginal cost. Anyway, if I want to send you the few bytes representing my own wealth, like, you know, wire transferring to you 50 euros, I have to pay a fee. I can do that 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. We do 2 days settlement. So this is funny. I mean, this is completely unreasonable. So the question is not if, but who and when will gift humanity with a global, instantaneous, peer-to-peer payment network. And this is basically taken care of by permissionless innovation. What I mean by permissionless innovation? I mean that process that is fast, effective, and also gentle, I will say. I'm not talking about, radical, antagonistic development. Even if what defines this permissionless innovation is no centralized security mechanism, no barrier to enter, no editorial control. If this does sound unfamiliar to you, I'm sorry, because you already experienced that. I mean, email has not been designed by a consortium of postal agencies. Internet has not been developed by a consortium of telcos. Why a new monetary system or its decentralized transactional network should be designed by a consortium of banks? I really don't know why it should be the case. But so when I encountered Bitcoin in 2014, after 20 years in interest rate derivatives, I studied physics at university, I realized that I didn't stop for a second in my life thinking about what money is. And thinking about that, I came up with an answer, which at the time I considered very brilliant. Money is a social relation instrument. As it often happens with my most brilliant ideas, I just discovered that people more brilliant than me discovered that few centuries ago. Namely, this one was already affirmed by Adam Smith. And what I mean by social relation instrument, as human beings, we are all born into a gift economy, okay? None of us, hopefully, has paid for the parental care we received, okay? But this gift economy can include family, friends, neighbors, maybe our tribe, in a way. But sooner or later, we encounter people we do not trust because we do not know them, or maybe we do not trust, or maybe we know them, and that's why we do not trust them. But anyway, in both cases, we are such a social animal that we want to cooperate even with people we do not trust, even with people we do not know. That's where commerce and exchange economy arise from, okay? And so we have invented barter, but if I give you my eggs this morning and you want to give me your milk, I might not want milk this morning, and so the coincidence of wants is a problem, and we as human beings have invented money. Money as a medium of exchange. And I really hope that you get some kind of intellectual pleasure into realizing that money is a synthetic asset human beings have invented in order to work and to cooperate and to trade with people they do not trust, which is quite a powerful idea if you think about it, okay? And of course, now that we are experiencing for the first time in history a real, proper, global information economy, supranational digital money is badly needed, okay? And this was the dream of Friedrich August von Hayek, Economic Nobel Prize. In the last 20 years of his life, he has been writing and rewriting The Nationalization of Money, this beautiful booklet, where not only he complains about history being history of money, being largely a history of inflation engineered by governments for their own gain, but he also asks why we do consider a government monopoly of money as indispensable. He said that as every monopoly, it has deprived the public of the opportunity to discover and use a better, reliable money. And so, again, paraphrasing Adam Smith, he said, blessed will be the day when it will be no longer from the benevolence of the government that we expect good money, but from the regards of the bank for their own interest. Well, not really banks. In this case, peer-to-peer online community have been starting doing better money or competing money. But the problem they had to face, this online community, was the problem of double spending. To securely transfer value using digital means has been possible for decades, okay? Wire transfers. Anyway, in any digital cash scheme, wherever you have a digital artifact representing wealth, like the amount of money you have on your bank account, to avoid that digital artifact to be duplicated, to be spent twice, so that I send you the amount of money I have on my bank account to you, and then to you too, Well, this is only possible because a centralized trusted party, in this case my bank, overview the updates to his own ledger, and so a centralized trusted party is always being required to prevent double spending, okay? How can Bitcoin work without a central authority? Well, first off, all network nodes validate and clear all transactions in the Bitcoin network. And those special nodes, called mining nodes, the nodes that provide also the additional computational power required for settlement, well, those nodes, how they can reach consensus on transaction history? How can they ensure that the Bitcoin is spent once, not twice? Well, this is quite hard without a central authority because consensus in a distributed network with faulty or malicious nodes is a very hard problem. There is results of computer science that prove that it's impossible to reach consensus in an asynchronous network. It might seem hard, but it's not that hard. Let's make it simple. Let's figure out that we are in a synchronous network, okay? Right now we are not, because I'm speaking, you are all listening to me at the same time. But let's figure out that we can also talk on a one-by-one basis, okay? I cannot broadcast to all of you. And we want to reach consensus on something very simple, like a logical variable, true or false, okay? And I say to this lady, true. And maybe she's a faulty node, I'm sorry. She's maybe deaf or hard on hearing, and she propagates, I say true, and she propagates false. Or maybe she's malicious, she's a malicious node. You know that even if just one of us is faulty or malicious, we can spend how much time we want in this room, but we will never reach consensus on something as simple as true-false. How is it possible to reach consensus on on a ledger preserving economic values, where you can take it for granted that there will be malicious nodes actively trying to manipulate communication for their own economic benefit, okay? Well, mining solved this problem. Why is that? Because miners compete among themselves to validate a new block of transactions. And the winner, the one providing proof of work of the finalization of a new block, well, that one is rewarded with the issuance of new Bitcoins in a special transaction included in that same block of transactions. And this solved the double spending problem, because if the winning miner, if the winner would include an invalid transaction in the block, like a double spending transaction, well, when he goes and propagated the block to the network, we as network nodes will notice that the block included an invalid transaction. Because of that, we will deem the block as invalid, and we will reject that block. Rejecting that block means like that block never entered into the transaction history. And doing that, even the Coinbase transaction, the issuance of new Bitcoin, which is included in that same block, it will not enter into the history of transaction. And so the winning miner will have wasted his work. What I'm saying here is that in the Bitcoin network, there is an economic incentive for the mining nodes to be honest. And this is what allows Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, to reach distributed consensus. So to achieve consensus using actually economic incentive, or even better, game theory economic incentive for the mining nodes to be honest. And so double spending is solved without a central trusted party, and Bitcoin can resist the attacks of malicious agents as long as they do not control network majority. And miners are compensated for their proof of work using seigniorage revenues. What I mean by seigniorage revenues, you know, that huge amount of wealth originating from the ability of minting money, okay, of printing out new money. That huge amount of wealth is socialized in the Bitcoin network in order to cover for the cost of the network, or more precisely, to cost for the double spending, for distributed consensus, sorry, okay? And this competition has led to, impressive computational power securing the Bitcoin network. The hash rate, which is the measure of the computational power, is 100,000 times superior to the combined world top 500 supercomputer. Okay, this is impressive. This is the most secure network in the world. There is no financial military network of comparable security. And to manipulate the Bitcoin transaction history, you will need 51% of that computational power. And I'm sorry, but the hardware is not on the shelf available for you to buy, so you have to design the hardware, to deploy in a server farm, to invest into designing and electric power and cost of labor. So it's pretty much impressive, the kind of security, or seen from the other side, the economic resource you should invest in order to manipulate the Bitcoin network. And when you had such resources at your disposal, why to act dishonestly? You can act honestly and gain from seigniorage. So you are incentivized to act honestly, okay? This has been a virtuous cycle where mining reward has increased the hashing power of the network, increasing in turn Bitcoin security, which has led to appreciating price for Bitcoin, which has made mining rewards even more tempting, and so on and so forth. Even with such a huge computational power, it's not like blocks of transaction arise more quickly, because the protocol adapts the difficulty of the proof of work that the miner must satisfy to have one block on average every 10 minutes. Okay, so you see it's a stochastic process. You might have a block 45 minutes after the previous one, or a few seconds after the previous one, but on average it's 10 minutes. This is very important because this is Bitcoin monetary rule. 50 new Bitcoins per block every 10 minutes. This quantity actually halves every 4 years, and we already are in the 12.5 Bitcoin per block era. This is the only way new Bitcoins are released, and it's called mining because of its similarity with the progressive scarcity of gold extraction. And it is a supply free of discretionary intervention. This is the Bitcoin supply of money. You see that is completely deterministic. The amount of Bitcoin being issued decrease at a deterministic rate, and the supply of Bitcoin is completely inelastic. Being predetermined cannot adapt to change in demand, which explains the Bitcoin huge volatility. But so what makes Bitcoin special? Not the fact that it is digital or scriptural, it only exists as a validated transaction. Maybe the fact that it is an asset, not a liability. I mean, Bitcoin is not an IOU, is not a promise. Bitcoin only promised to be Bitcoin, that's it. It's a bearer instrument. We haven't touched on technical issues, but if you lose the private key, which you have to use to manage your Bitcoin are lost forever. It can be transferred but not duplicated. We already assessed that it can be spent but not double spent. And please, do not underestimate this conclusion, because, I mean, probably we all share the idea, we still share the idea that everything digital can be duplicated. But this is not the case anymore. Since Bitcoin appeared 10 years ago, it has proved that there can be something digital which cannot be duplicated. And this is extraordinary. It's scarce in digital realm as nothing else. Before, we have seen in the previous chart that there will be only 21 million Bitcoin 120 years down the road. It mimics gold monetary policy, Well, it's clear that Bitcoin is, or at least wants to be, the digital equivalent of gold with a secure, uncensorable, embedded settlement network, okay? Bitcoin is more a crypto commodity than a cryptocurrency, and this is the groundbreaking achievement by Satoshi Nakamoto, surely not the blockchain technology. If one thinks about the role of physical gold in the history of civilization, money, and finance, you can appreciate how the digital equivalent of gold could be disruptive in the current digital civilization, the future of money and finance. Bitcoin could be the new global reserve asset. And so, to conclude this first part on Bitcoin, it might be nice to compare Bitcoin with physical gold. So I will read on the left, you read on the right, okay? Gold has been adopted by all civilization without central planning. For centuries, it has been the most successful form of money. It has bootstrapped all monetary system we know of. It has been surpassed by other kinds of money without becoming obsolete. This is exactly what is happening to Bitcoin right now. But the world seems like they love talking about blockchain without Bitcoin. Now, what is a blockchain? Well, I will spare you the details about the technical definition of hash pointer linked list of blocks, but it is basically an append-only sequential data structure. New blocks can only be appended at the end of the chain, and to change the block in the middle of the chain, all subsequent blocks need to be changed. So it's very inefficient if compared to a traditional relational database. Now, if you do not have Bitcoin, if you do not have a native digital asset intrinsic to the blockchain technology you are analyzing, does it make sense to talk about blockchain? Well, if you don't have Bitcoin, if you do not have a native digital asset intrinsic to the blockchain technology, you have no asset available to rewards miner, and so you have to appoint validator officials in order to validate your transaction. So you must have a central governance. But if you have a central governance, why should validators use a blockchain that is a subpart data structure instead of a database? This is the question nobody really answers, and I encourage you to look at it and making a discriminating point when you have to assess the viability of technological solutions. This is a dramatic misunderstanding. Confucius said, when a wise man points at the moon, the fool examines the fingers. I love to say that the moon is Bitcoin and the finger is blockchain, but the key points, everything started in October 2015 with the Economist cover, blockchain, not Bitcoin, will prove revolutionary in banking. I'm sorry, at that time they were talking only about finance and banking, not yet shipping. I respectfully disagreed since then. Why is finance fascinated with blockchain? Well, this is because blockchain transactions are immediately validated and cleared, then settled shortly thereafter without a central authority. Well, in the financial world, we actually have such a transaction. It is called the cash transaction. I hand you a 20-euro note, you can clear it, you take it, we settled. Okay? That is very, very efficient and does not require a central authority. The problem why finance is not experiencing such effective transaction is not technological. Financial transaction can take nanoseconds to execute, and then they clear and settle in days. This is not a technological problem. This is because of the so-called consensus by reconciliation. To settle a financial transaction, you need to reconcile multiple independent ledgers to allow for those checks and balances that we need for prescriptions, correction, restrictions. So it's a process problem. It's not a technological problem. Well, I'm not such an expert in the shipping environment, but I'm pretty confident that these two slides resonate with your experience. The problem is not technology, the problem is the process. Well, there is the mirage of low operational cost. Oh, blockchain is fantastic. Transactions are free. Well, not really. If one takes into account the synergy revenues invested in the Bitcoin network, each transaction has a cost of about $10 compared to the 20 cents of any credit card transaction. And cheaper forms of consensus have not been proven yet, unless you resort to centralized consensus, to a central counterparty, to a central governance overviewing and managing a central ledger. So in that case, will not be distributed or decentralized anymore. Okay, but it's fascinating, the idea of having a common ledger that is a single shared data set. If we had such a single data source, we could avoid reconciliation. We will all of us, we will look at that ledger, and by magic, we will be in agreement, okay? But without a central governing node, how do we manage priorities between conflicting updates? Or stated in Bitcoin parlance, which consensus model we do adopt? Bilateral consensus. Yes, I've heard this such kind of dummy things being said. I mean, bilateral consensus is just a contract. You sign it, I do sign it. Maybe it's an electronic PDF, so you provide digital signature, I provide digital signature. This doesn't make that blockchain technology at all. I mean, that is just digitization of documents. Central governance, well, we are back to a database, a central database administrator. And then if we really have a single authoritative data source, what does happen if that source is hacked? Well, our copies are not authoritative at all. So any hack, any compromise of that single data source actually cannot be fixed at all. Are we really sure we want that? Don't we want a recurse mechanism? So blockchain is often advocated as distributed databases. It's, I think, a couple of months now that on Wikipedia, if you Google for distributed databases, you will see that now blockchain is listed as one technology for distributing databases. I'm glad. I mean, I've been saying this for years. So blockchain is just an incremental evolution from standard database, and it's available, distributed databases are available also using traditional techniques. Blockchains have not been designed to be used as databases. They have poor writing performances. You remember that. If you want to change a block in the middle, you have to rewrite the whole chain, and they have abysmal querying abilities, okay? So, and then, you know what? Real use cases are still missing. In the finance world, I often say, well, it's 3 years you talk or we talk about blockchain. Can you point at a use case? Well, no. I mean, there is no use cases but Bitcoin. The questions to be answered are, can we achieve whatever we want to do using a database? If that is the case, please stick with reliable, scalable, efficient technologies. What kind of consensus do you require? Because, well, blockchain are well suited for distributed consensus, but oftentimes you will find that you don't want really distributed consensus. You want a centralized counterparty for that checks and balances mechanism and to provide a recurse mechanism. What kind of security is required? Because the cryptography using blockchain is preventive, like it doesn't allow invalid transaction. But if you want a security which might be corrective, like, you know, changing something that has happened, well, blockchain is not well suited for that. Unless you're using blockchain as a marketing buzzword, you know, you just have a regular distributed database and you're talking about blockchain, which is fine. I mean, if you want to use the marketing buzzword, that's fine with me. But you're not really talking about blockchain. You're talking about cryptography. It's like in the nuclear explosion of Bitcoin, applied cryptography is like the radioactive fallout. It can be used to harden existing business processes, but we are talking about databases on cryptographic steroids, evolutionary, non-disruptive technology. Let's take a look at this nuclear fallout, because, okay, my destruence part is finished. Now let's try to do something construents. How can we go beyond Bitcoin? Is there a blockchain beyond Bitcoin? Surely, that is. It's called notarization. What I mean is this. You have a data file, okay? That can be a PDF, a Word document, or a couple of terabytes of a transactional database, or a movie, or whatever you can think of. Okay, you have a data file. You provide that data file as input into an hash function, peculiar cryptographic functions, that provide as a result an hash value, okay, that alphanumeric string, which is actually a number in hexadecimal notation. So the hash function associates a number to any given input data file. That number is like a fingerprint. It's a digital fingerprint, a unique identifier of that data file. Well, like as with every DNA produce a unique fingerprint, but from the fingerprint you cannot reconstruct the DNA. This is also true for hash values. So that hash value is a unique identifier of the data file, but from that hash value you cannot reconstruct the data file. Now you can take that hash value and put it into a Bitcoin transaction, okay, which enters at time, let's say, T2 into a blockchain, into a Bitcoin block. Now, 2 years down the road, you could prove to whatever third party, maybe to a judge, the fact that 2 years before, you add that data file. Why that? Well, because the attestation, the inclusion of that hash value into the Bitcoin blockchain proves that at that time you must have had the data file. Otherwise, you would have not been able to come up with the hash value. And that attestation is immutable because of the immutability of the Bitcoin blockchain. So the security I tried to explain previously, which make that blockchain immutable, is actually making the attestation of the hash value immutable. So it's like we are piggybacking Bitcoin security. This timestamping procedure is usually identified as notarization, and it's impressive because a single transaction, a single Bitcoin transaction, can timestamp an unlimited number of documents. There are already calendar services providing aggregation of documents and attestation of Bitcoin blockchain, and the process has been standardized to allow for third-party auditability, and as such, is suitable for regulatory prescription. I'm talking about the Open Timestamp Protocol. And this is what I love to call digital gold jewelry, you know? What jewelry is for gold, notarization could be for Bitcoin. Not essential, but very effective at leveraging gold beauty. So, beyond Bitcoin, oh, sorry, the title is wrong. This is about the shipping industry. I will update the slides for when they are distributed to you. So let's focus on the shipping industry, okay? The transformative blockchain potential has been fine, I mean, to prepare this presentation because it's just a permutation of things I've seen in finance in the last 3 years. So it could reshape the flow of trade finance, making logistics in global trade faster and leaner. Could eliminate middlemen, will reduce paperwork associated with data entry, will link parties needing to share data on a common platform, increasing the trust associated with geographically dispersed trading partners. Improve transparency and traceability in supply chain, establishing the provenance of good or raw material from its origin. Could tether regulatory processes to physical logistic processes. Could automate commercial processes in logistics with smart contracts, triggering supply chain processes, including payment in real time. Fantastic, isn't it? I mean, If you're lost and you don't figure out how all this is possible given the premises I've showed you, well, you're not alone. I mean, I share your disconcert for such, impressive promises. And we should separate hype from reality. It is often unclear how blockchain works and what it can do for real. I'm pretty confident usually that my explanation was probably, I wouldn't say the first time you've heard about that, but it's easy, isn't it? Well, it's not that common. Blockchain cannot be touted really as a solution to all inefficiencies, especially because blockchain is moving forward at a very slow pace. So even if those promises are wonderful, I mean, they're taking times and times. There have been many pilots. Well, all pilots I know of, they have been conducted in private and with a limited scope. So it's hard to know exactly how successful they have been. And you might remember RFID, heralded as industry game changer in the mid 2000s, and never realized their initial promises. I think that blockchain is quite similar. So what blockchain can do for the shipping industry is surely to simplify trade by removing paper and centralizing information. It can help digitizing logistic documents. Those documents can be digitally signed and timestamped, hopefully into Bitcoin blockchain. And this will make them non-repudiable, making clearer where inaccuracies have occurred, who was responsible for them, and when. But this, you know what? This is a generic digitization process, where the only contribution that blockchain is providing is to provide timestamping. So you have probably an efficient, centralized digitization process, which can be hardened using Bitcoin timestamping so that the documents, which must be digitally signed, being timestamped, they become non-repudiable. And of course, doing digitization and centralization of information will eliminate errors from multiple parties entering the same data into different databases. But again, blockchain is not really needed. Any authoritative central repository, maybe with a distributed database technology, which they might call blockchain, will be good enough, okay? There is no blockchain magic. I mean, blockchain, please, cannot confirm veracity of data. It's not like if I timestamp something, all of a sudden, whatever I have timestamped is true. Blockchain does not make data accurate or people trustworthy. Moreover, blockchain is not needed to audit if data has been tampered with. We are actually using just cryptography. Is that cryptographic nuclear fallout of that Bitcoin explosion I was telling about before? Blockchain can only harden digital signature and timestamping using notarization. That is the major contribution, technical contribution it can provide. And as Eric Rempel, I don't know him, but I found that quote on the internet. I say that, and I think it's pretty much straight on. Tech gets adopted when it becomes simple, when it is demystified. Okay, so we need to demystify blockchain. The idea of having a single version of truth, I mean, trust does not exist in a vacuum, cannot be generated by a system, can only be generated by a process shared among human beings. The idea of having a single permissioned cloud-based repository of documents, to have smart contract, which means automation, let's say, of ownership transfer once a set of conditions is met, or triggering payments between parties upon change of ownership. This is shipment management software and central clearing authority. Okay? They can use whatever technology they want. Probably they use a distributed database technology. They might call it blockchain technology because of marketing, but there is no free lunch, moreover. Cost and times are required to mature new technology into a set of private, independent, interoperable solutions. Cost and times are required to set up a new organization because there is always resistance to changes and fear of a no. And cost and times are required to build a network of distributed parties. So if this is a scheme that I picked up from an Assagenti report about the international trade information flow, what is apparent to me is that current logistic processes are complex, involves many parties, and are documentation heavy. What your industry might probably require is a deep rethinking of how shipping parties interact. It's not like just we do apply some blockchain magic, which is underspecified, which is ephemeral, which is even not that understood, because if we talk blockchain this way, we are only obfuscating the problems. For the time being, it's crucial to build up blockchain knowledge and capabilities. So to understand what blockchain is and to try to think how it does apply to the international trade information flow. So there is a bibliography, but I will skip that for the takeaways. Bitcoin is hard to understand. It's not a technology, it's a cultural paradigm shift instead. Bitcoin solves the double spending problem of distributed consensus, allowing to move from centralized paradigm to a decentralization security paradigm. Bitcoin is digital gold. As such, it could be as relevant as physical gold for the history of our civilization, the future of money and finance. Blockchain instead is mostly just hype. There is no blockchain without Bitcoin. There is a blockchain beyond Bitcoin, which is called notarization. And for the shipping industry, it is crucial to rethink how parties interact and build up blockchain knowledge and capabilities to assess which contribution blockchain can provide for real. Okay, so thank you very much for your time, and let's move forward.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. And now, Mr. Morton, please.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today in Genoa to talk about blockchain. I'm not always sure why I'm talking about blockchain because I still don't really understand it. To me, blockchain is just another way of exchanging data. So why have I been asked here? Well, as the International Port Community Systems Association, we have members across the world. To give you some idea, and on a daily basis, our members are exchanging in excess of 50 million messages a day with their users between port community systems. We also have air and seaport community systems. We have air and seaport authorities, and also single window operators. So many of you will know about the maritime single window in Europe. So between our membership, we cover a huge range of logistic service providers in information technology, but they're all part of the community. They're not IT software developers, they're part of the community. So today, I'm going to give you some examples of some of the things that some of our members have been looking at with blockchain, but then look at the challenges and implementation of blockchain. It may cover some of the previous speakers' areas, but it's not simple. So I will today talk a bit about the bill of lading proof of concept that one of our members in Israel is developing, and also the Port of Antwerp's e-FITO certificate proof of concept. And then go on to the challenges, and hopefully afterwards it will raise some questions for the discussion and questions later. We all know about the bill of lading, I hope. It is something that has tried to be made electronic for many, many years in different ways, shapes or forms. One of the challenges is there are multiple parties within a bill of lading, and we need to be sure where they are. As you will see, that's a simplified version of the Bill of Lading Partners that came up with for our initiative. So our initiative on the Bill of Lading was led by the ports of Israel. They're working with lines like Zim lines to actually try and identify how they can do it, and whether blockchain is a suitable technology for exchanging information. But as I said, blockchain is just about data, exchanging data, using another technology to do it. So what we have is a business flow. So what you see is users, they interact through web applications in terms of with a port community system. Why do we do it that way? Because many companies in the shipping world are small and medium size. You start talking about blockchain and they're still struggling with Excel spreadsheets. So how can you talk about a whole new technology and a way of doing things when their technology knowledge is relatively limited? But as port community systems, which are already a trusted party within a port environment, they understand the technology. So the PCSs are become almost the first block in a chain and the last block in a chain, because they can share and exchange data in traditional ways, whether it's an edifact message, an XML message, an email, a PDF, or some other form, or a web interface. But you know that you're sending it to a trusted party who holds your data securely, confidentially. You then have the validators in the chain, the nodes, as we heard earlier, who are able to validate that information to make sure it's correct going along the line. And then you have the smart contract. So the issue with the Bill of Lading, from the ship agent through to the PCS and back to the exporter, who may receive it in a traditional way, who then forwards the Bill of Lading and via the nodes through to the advising bank. It's then approved by the issuing bank, endorsed by the importer, submitted to the ship agent to confirm, and then the ship agent issues the delivery order via the PCS, because it's a logistical flow information, that part is. So what you see is something very simple, or it looks very simple. And you'll hear a bit later about other methods of doing it. The challenge we have with this is the trust. This is cross-border. It's not within a single ecosystem. It's between multiple platforms or multiple nodes. What is your legal contract? Everybody talks about smart contracts, but they come after you've had your business-to-business relationship, your legal agreement. If I want to share data, I'm not just going to say, open up your system and I'll give you the data. You have a legal agreement as to what can be done with the data, what the cost of that data is. So there needs to be a legal contract. So blockchain doesn't get around the solution of trust. You still have to have a business-to-business relationship. Once you've agreed that, the smart contract comes into play. So every time you do a transaction, that just implements what you've agreed on the business-to-business side of things. And so I sometimes think when people talk about blockchain, they think it's a magical tool where you don't have to have these business relationships. You still do. And the challenge that we are facing now is you need to have those multilateral agreements between multiple parties to agree the process flow. You need to analyze the process flow of that document. And this is just for the Bill of Lading. What about certificates of origin? What about all of the other documents that are required? So, though we've created this initiative, we're now struggling at the point of the technology is not really the issue. The issue is the people and agreeing between the people what they can and they can't do. And how do you do that between countries? You have two different countries. What legal system do you base it on? What happens if there's a dispute? The normal contractual requirements that you would go through. But you're potentially having this between multiple parties in multiple different countries. So there are simplified solutions, and as I said, you'll hear about some of those later. But when you're trying to create a fully distributed network using something like blockchain, there are huge challenges ahead. The next one is the phytosanitary certificate. The Port of Antwerp decided that with their customs there was an issue over phytosanitary certificates. How can they deal with it? And so they first of all did an analysis of the current flow. And as you can see, the cost for sending the phytosanitary certificate from New Zealand, in this case it's apples coming from New Zealand into Belgium during the season. So about just under €30 to send the documents from the authorities through to the exporter. Another 100 or so euros to transship that by courier over to the importer, and then to transship that to the customs in Belgium. So you are talking nigh on €200 as a cost just to exchange a certificate. So the technology can be used to create solutions to that, to reduce that cost, which all of you must know about in terms of constantly having to get couriers involved. So this proof of concept was set up for a specific trade between New Zealand, the Port of Napier, and the Port of Antwerp. This proof of concept built upon smart contract building blocks on top of the basic blockchain technology. Also, Belgian customs and New Zealand customs, or phytosanitary authority, sorry, trust each other. They know each other. They know they have a specific trade. So they have a relationship. And this was executed successfully between June and August of this year. So as you will see, in the pilot case, you have the blockchain infrastructure. You have New Zealand, Antwerp, different parties within Antwerp. This was supported by a company in Antwerp called T-Mining. One of our members, Port of Antwerp, and in New Zealand by one of our other members, One Stop. So they're all working together. So you have lots of different nodes in terms of sharing that data. You can see in the pilot case a web application, blockchain node to blockchain node, and then the infrastructure between the different parties at the bottom. So each of those parties had to implement a node themselves. They needed a web application so data could be uploaded into it. So that's worked, but it's very simple. It's almost point to point. That's probably not the correct technology term, but it's going from New Zealand phytosanitary authorities to the authorities in Belgium. They trust each other, and the other people just validate that information. So it works because it's within an ecosystem that's already there of organizations working together. The trust is already there. The blockchain doesn't provide the trust, but it does validate once you've had those business relationships. So hopefully that gives you some idea on a couple of the initiatives. And of course, many of our members are involved in TradeLens, the IBM Maersk initiative. They'll be involved in the new initiative that was announced last week between DP World, Hutchison, and a number of CMA, CMG, and a number of other ocean lines who are creating their own blockchain initiative. So our members are heavily involved in the blockchain. However, there is a lot of hype. Everybody wants to come. It's great. It's a great way of, if you mention blockchain, everybody comes to a workshop because they think they need to know about it. There are some challenges that we see. The maturity of the technology, the long transaction potential time. So what's the complexity of your smart contract? The number of validators, the technology. Is the technology mature enough? Well, as was said earlier, it might take 5 or 10 years. Anybody who was around when Edifact messages were starting to be used by the shipping industry 20 years ago, it's taken 20 or so years to implement simple messages in most shipping lines. So the technology here may be outstripped by another technology that comes along in a year's time. Technology is moving so fast. And when we've tried with our members to look at this, the challenge is, you say, well, this is the process flow. If that process flow changes, as the previous speaker said, you have to change the whole thing. The cost for doing that is quite high. So you need to be clear on the process flows. We've seen lots of startups. Many of you have probably been approached by startup companies wanting, we can do blockchain that will solve all your problems. but they're using their own standards. In one case, in Estonia, the port of Tallinn has a container release system that they piloted. The company that developed it, great, it worked. So we said to them, you're releasing a container, what type? They said, oh, a container is a container. I'm like, no, a container is not a container. Is it 45 foot? Is it 40 foot? Is it 20 foot? Is it refrigerated? Etc., etc. They didn't understand the industry. So if you are considering looking at blockchain, find a company that understands shipping and transport. If you don't, it'll go horribly wrong. There's a lack of expert developers. Again, lots of startups. How do you do that? We want to change something. Oh, well, it's not a database. You can't just change it. Yeah, but the process flow has changed for a new regulation that has come in. Oh, well, okay, but it's going to cost you. And then interoperability. We've seen Ethereum and all of the other different blockchain technologies coming through. To me, it's always a bit like the old videos, the VHS and the Betamax. Some people went to Betamax, some people went to VHS. Whereas now, everybody went to VHS, and that's of course been changed into CDs and CD-ROMs and Blu-ray and all of the other. And it's the same we're finding with blockchain. There are multiple different blockchain technologies that at the moment cannot connect together. So do you choose to use one over another? It's a real challenge. Ultimately, of course, they will connect together. But of course, when you have technology providers driving it, they will want you to use their technology. So you have to be very sure of what you're looking at. We know in Asia, in the Pan-Asian Alliance, which is an alliance of single window operators, they're looking at certificates of origin and exchanging them. The value they have is their mandated government organizations, but they're using an open blockchain, so it doesn't matter, open source blockchain, so it doesn't matter how you exchange the information and what technology you're using because it's open source. And they said that was the problem they came up with. People was trying to sell them one or other technology, and that just limited their ability to exchange across borders. Regulations and standards. When will Italian customs be able to accept blockchain? Your guess is as good as mine. That's the problem. So digital signatures, allegedly we have digital signatures around Europe through the new EIDAS regulation that's coming out. So how are the administrations putting in place the legal basis to accept digital, not just blockchain, but digital formats? They're not there yet. The new European regulation on electronic freight transport information, which is a proposal going through Parliament at the current time. That's about intra-EU cargo, where any documents that you are needed for transport can be provided digitally. However, to do that, you have to have a certified provider of that information. And then the question comes around, who do you, if you get stopped by the police in a truck and you say, oh yes, it's all on my telephone, they go, well, okay, but I want to see the original. So there are still questions over how that might be implemented. We're talking about new technology, the new European Maritime Single Window Environment proposal, which is a replacement for 2010-65 Maritime Single Window. They're talking about spreadsheet management in Excel. So agents and lines will have a Excel template to complete in order to upload onto a maritime single window. And we're standing here talking about blockchain when the authorities are still talking about Excel, which most of the people in the information technology industry don't use because it's not safe or secure. So the authorities need to catch up, and that is a problem. How do they put that in place in terms of the regulations? Data ownership. Well, there's some articles recently about the General Data Protection Regulation, which I assume you're all aware of. So let's go back to the shipping industry. passenger and crew lists, huge amounts of personal data on individuals, passports, visa numbers, dates of birth, all sorts of information. You need the permission of that beneficiary to share that data. You are sending that to a platform or multiple nodes in a blockchain, and you don't know who is going to have access to that data. Yes, you can get around that by having agreements up front, but with blockchain in a distributed system, you don't know who, even if it's just a hash, somebody is able to view that information. And so the overriding principle of the General Data Protection Regulation is privacy by design. Do we class blockchain as private by design when multiple parties potentially have access to it? Yes, you can get around that. But then what happens? Even a simple document that has a person's name on, a business-to-business document, such as the bill of lading, which may have a person's name on and other information. They then leave your company, and then they come back to you and say, I want to have the right to be forgotten. I want my name deleted off all of the systems. How do you do that on an immutable blockchain? It's a business-to-business document. It's not a regulatory document which has to be kept. They have different regulations. So how do you then delete that person's name off a document which might be 3 years old that's sitting in multiple other platforms? So there are some really large questions around general data protection and blockchain and whether they're compatible. I mentioned about standards and containers earlier. Data definitions are a huge problem. On a practical level, we're working with the International Maritime Organization and the World Customs Organization on the new IMO FAL forms to have them electronic. And we're creating an IMO data reference model. But customs authorities think port of arrival is quayside. Maritime authorities think port of arrival is port territory. That's two different places. And so you have to be speaking the same semantic language. And what we're seeing with a lot of startup in blockchain and other technologies, they don't have an understanding of the basic definitions. And so the UN CFACT and EDIFACT, they have the core component library, which is a free database of 12,000 definitions of data. It's a whole data model. There's a multimodal data reference model. There's multiple different models out there. So the information is there, but they're not being used because the technology providers don't understand it. And of course, different players have different levels. As a shipping line or a shipping agent, you might be really advanced in your technology, but if one of your partners is at the lower end, you can only move as fast as the speed of your lowest partner. So you need to support and help them. Other obstacles. Change business processes. You need to analyze the process flows. You need to be able to adapt those process flows with, for example, single window. When a new single window regulation comes in, how does that affect a whole flow? Do you have to redesign the whole system, or can you just adapt and change? That where port community systems, they adapt and change to those new regulations to help the industry solve the problems they have. If you try and implement blockchain, if it's in your own ecosystem, if it's in the Port of Geneva, you have development of PCS and other areas. So they can all come together. It's your own ecosystem. You know each other or are aware of each other. You start doing it cross-border, for example, China, Taiwan, Africa. We know bills of ladings coming out of Africa. Between 70 and 80% of them are wrong when they get issued. So you have some real challenges. And as said before, blockchain is and will be in use, but it needs to be used where it's appropriate. It will be used in certain port elements and processes, but it won't be used for everything. We know how complicated the port industry is, or the maritime industry is. So take a step back and have a look at what is really possible As I said, as you've probably seen, these alliances, or they're not alliances, the initiatives on blockchain, but all the shipping lines and terminals are all grouping together. But last Thursday, it was announced that 5 of those shipping lines, I think it's Maersk, CMA, Ocean Network, and 1 or 2 others, are creating a new institute or association to develop international standards for APIs, application programming interface. So they use it there. Though they're involved in blockchain, they're also going back to relatively simple APIs, which is a way of 2 systems talking to each other. And they're going to create some international standards or work with international standards organizations to create free and open standards for sharing data. So blockchain will be part of the future. How that future looks will be quite interesting. There are opportunities, of course, in terms of the blockchain. It does increase transparency, availability, reliability for all participants of the information. But the information is only as good as the information that is input. If the information that is put in is wrong, it doesn't matter whether you have the best transparency in the world, it's still going to be wrong. So you've got to be able to have the ability to update and change it. And we've seen a number of failures where some blockchain parties are developing blockchains and they assume that the information they're having is actually correct. And then when you say halfway along, well, actually it changes. You have to go all the way back to the beginning and start a new bill of lading or a new certificate of origin or something similar. There are also more efficient transfer of digital assets. That's really where we see blockchain. It helps you transfer an asset. That's really valuable. And if you have the security over that, that's really useful. And we've seen the successes in more of the direct peer-to-peer or 1 or 2 parties in a chain. Beyond that, it starts to become very complicated. There is increased security, but even talking to some of the leading blockchains, they expect blockchain to be hacked in a few years. We already see some cases starting. So it's a target. Blockchain is a target for hackers to see what they can get. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops and how secure these systems really are. We've talked about the smart contracts. The smart contracts work really well, but you have to have that business relationship first. There may be time and cost reductions in the long term, but your initial cost for implementation can be quite high. And as I said, blockchain should be used once you've understood what you're trying to do. Don't just use it because it's blockchain, because it may not be the easiest or the quickest way of doing it. So even in the IBM Maersk, most of their events are still using APIs and not blockchain. The transfer of documents will be using blockchain in some way, shape or form. But the events like container status, is it customs cleared? Is it cleared for phytosanitary? Can it leave the terminal? Which is done already in many places with port community systems automatically. You don't necessarily need to use blockchain to overrun that because it doesn't provide any added value. So hopefully I've given you some idea of the opportunities, but also some of the challenges. There's a lot of hype. Hype was mentioned earlier. Let's look at what you're trying to achieve. If you think it's a good solution, you have to go out to the market and understand what you're trying to achieve and find somebody who understands your industry. If you don't, it will be a challenge to be successful and it may cost. Just to summarize then, you still need business-to-business relationships. Smart contracts are only secondary. You need to make sure that the technology processes fit with the processes you're trying to achieve. It's very good for transfer of an asset or similar, such as a bill of lading. But again, data protection. How do you ensure the protection of data of individuals is compliant with general data protection regulation, where your fines are 4% of global turnover or 20 million, whichever is higher. So there are a number of challenges, and I suspect that in a year or two there will be another technology that comes out that will end up replacing half of what blockchain happens. And so as technology moves forward, it's a case of being able to adapt and change your needs and your views on how to use technology. Thank you very much.